first thing I'd like to do is welcome Mr. Ed Keys, Mr. Doug Jones. Doug or Douglas?
Doug.
Douglas. And we shall move on. Welcome to our committee. And we need the approval of the November 6th, 2018 meeting.
So moved. The minutes, you mean, sorry?
Yeah, minutes, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Yeah. Okay, and the adoption of the December 4th agenda. Oops, sorry.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Is there a seconder?
Oh,
Gary?
okay.
Yeah.
And we need adoption of the December 14th.
So moved?
Second.
Seconder? Okay. Any members here in conflict with this agenda? Any items on the agenda? Okay. Our consent agenda, I don't know how we're going to do this because two of our members didn't have it in advance. But for the consent agenda, we normally just go ahead and get a mover for the consent agenda, a seconder. Can we still do that?
Yeah, I had it in advance.
Oh, you had
Yes,
it in
I did,
advance, okay.
yeah.
Okay, so.
I'll move adoption of the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Seconder? You? The next thing would be Chief?
Item number 6.
We're down to 6 now.
So, again, I'm sorry, saw Commissioner White's name there.
Oh, no, we're down, the open session down below.
Sorry, my mistake. So, this evening, I have members of the auxiliary with us tonight. So this is what, in the past, every year we would have an auxiliary report so that the board would have, and the community have a good understanding what the team from our auxiliary do for our community and do for our organization. So I would call upon Glenn Fillmore. Glenn's been with us for 19 years in the auxiliary program to present his annual report. Glenn.
Cool.
No, I presume you have personal buttons here. Thanks, Chief and Inspector, and your worship, and the board. It's certainly a privilege and an honor to be able to come here and present the year-end report and the success that all the folks at the back contribute to every year. And as the chief mentioned, the program's been in place for 19 years. And I can say, myself and Chris Pine, the only other gray-haired gentleman down the back on the far right. At least I can say, Chris, that I'm a little thinner than I was 19 years ago, but a lot more gray.
In fact, I remember when you were here 19 years ago. So.
Yeah. So at present we have a complement of 21 active members, and throughout 2018 we will volunteer over 2,800 hours by the end of the year. And if you really think about what the thrust of bringing the auxiliary program within the police force was all around community policing, and extending beyond the boundaries of what community policing is all about. There have been 2 innovative community-based programs that were created by members of the auxiliary. The first being the Junior Police Academy, which has been in operation for 10 years. And it's a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. And today we've graduated 17 junior police constables, and this May of next year, we'll graduate 7 more, and I'll expect and hope members of the board attend that. And also a police foundations course that was developed and introduced in the curriculum through the Department of Education, and it's being delivered at Simons High School. and that's been in operation for 6 years, and 275 students have attended that. You know, as we mentioned, we've been in operation for a little over 19 years. In April of next year, it'll be 20. Throughout the 19 years past and present, we've had, I had to count them up, 70 auxiliary police officers throughout that 19 years that have delivered almost 69,000 hours. And you know, that just speaks to the tremendous success that the program is. So these pillars of success here are really the guiding principles that all of our members you know, execute, and really guides their every action. And certainly value, you know, we deliver values to the members, the force, and the communities in which we serve, and ensure our actions are guided with integrity, respect, and professionalism. Accountability, holding ourselves to a high standard. That's something that's very important to us all. And you know, both to the members in which we serve, and the force, and the community as well. Partnership, you know, we do hold, you know, even though we are a volunteer organization, volunteer group, you know, we do hold a position with the force and community that's unlike any other, and it really is that integrated bridge between the police force and the community. And you know, I don't need to say anything more on the commitment to 69,000 hours. Rappers have that well. So in terms of the membership for 2018, as I mentioned, 21 active. You know, what's worth noting here is there are 4 members that contributed about 50% of the overall volume of hours, and I think it's you know, some you know, formal recognition in their file perhaps of those that executed over 200 hours last year, this year, which is Auxiliary Constables Kramer, Fleming, who's here, Fox, and Phillips, who's also here. You know, and I did want to show some additional pivots here. So I do have a column representing last year's hours and this year's, and the career total over the amount of years they've been here, and you'll see the classes on the far left, and then the average per year. You know, you think that you know, every one of the folks all have a, you know, a full-time, you know, day job, and you know, this is strictly volunteer for them, and I think it speaks, you know, accolades to the you know, the commitment and the passion that brings everyone here. So this is really just giving you the last 5-year view of the attrition that we've had. And you know, I think it was the chief and I that put in place some time ago, you know, was a memorandum of commitment between us and the members. You know, we saw up front, you know, if you look at probably the first 10 years, we saw the attrition rates were quite substantial, but there's a, you know, there is an exceptional story behind that, which I'll share. You know, this memorandum of commitment has seen us slow down the amount of attrition, which was the intended impact that we had hoped for. You know, the very positive outcome as a result of the attrition trend. If you look at the first class from 1999 to 2004, 20% of those auxiliaries went on to become police officers. In 2004 to 2009, class 2, 65% of them. And in 2009 to 16, 29%, and even in the class that came through they graduated in December 16. 10% of them have gone off. So it's that in itself is a tremendous success as well. So this represents the request for community services. And, when I talk about the attrition rates and the ebbs and flows that come with folks, whatever the circumstances that they depart the program for, it's interesting that the annual trend continues to be grow 15% year over year. This year, 365 hours going to community service requests. And, these are just examples. They're not. That's not all inclusive of what we'll call it for.
Sorry, what's the CAGR stand for? CAGR?
Annual growth rate.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So this is really showing another pivot of the information, essentially, but shows the last 5 years again of what the annual performance of the unit has been. And again, the bottom chart really gives you the holistic view and breakdown of how those hours are consumed. Patrol services obviously dominates with 2,400 hours, and it's you should all know as well that we're there to support, not replace the members there. And as mentioned in the previous slide, 365 hours to community and 56 hours to administration. So this really gives you the 19-year snapshot of our contributed hours year over year, and with this view, I guess if you recall some of the trends I talked about, the attrition rates, you can see the first 10 years. When you talk about the 30 and the 65%, that again, a very positive thrust. Those members joining, choosing policing as a full-time career, and then you can see kind of in the last 9 that trend has slowed down, and again, that's a lot of hours year over year.
Well, what happened in 2004? What's the big end? Did it take you off your pace?
No.
What was the big bump in 2000?
New group.
Okay.
New group. I think in that group it was. I think we added about 22 members in one swoop. They were a keen group.
Everybody was keen.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, and keen, but also that was the group that 65% went to APA and become police officers.
Yeah.
So they were especially keen. Yeah. So the Junior Police Academy, as I mentioned here, this one very much comes from a place of the heart. We started this program. It's been in operation for 8 years. So we're about to graduate Troop 4 in May of next year. But we were probably about 1.5 to 2 years, really developing the program to make sure that we had the content, we understood the youth we were going to interact with. But it's a partnership between the police force and the Boys and Girls Club, and it's really at the heart of it, it's a mentorship program between police officers and youth at risk. Our focus is on building relationships with these youth. Through those, they establish commitment and then the responsibility and the empowerment piece. This program's unlike any other at the Boys and Girls Club. Kids can come and go. Today I'm going to do art, tomorrow I'm going to go games room. With JPA, they make a 2-year commitment, and they go every once a week, every week. They can't, pick and choose. Once you're in, you're in. If you, stop showing out, you're out. So it's, what we find is, for the first 2 months, we see a swell of kids come in, and we end up with that core group that sticks for the 2 years. So I mentioned that we've graduated 3 groups now, 17 youth, and these are some of the activities that the youth engage in. Next April, May, they're it's I always describe these youth as they're all between the age of 10 and 13, and their little lives are 5 degrees off true north, and you add 10 years on, and it's whether they're in the system in some shape or form. I could stand here and tell you all kinds of stories about these kids that the little lives that were off true north, and they're back on track, and just probably a month ago, getting phone calls from some of these kids that are now out of high school, going to tech school. So it's it's great to see those impacts. So they marched in the Remembrance Day parade. You're in the Santa Claus parade. We have a curriculum that's based out of quarters essentially. And there's learning outcomes in each one, but we're pretty fluid in that whatever the kids need that night, we'll adjust. Next May, the final piece to their training is we take them to PEI, and they attend APA for a day. And so we take them down for a night meeting. As Ethan will attest, a lot of these kids never been out of St. John before, so it's a big deal. And we've been at APA three times now, and with each time, they just keep hitting it out of the park, and it's absolutely tremendous for the kids. So graduation day, I'll certainly extend an invitation. The kids will all take the oath to the badge, and they'll be sworn in, and that's when they get their hats and badges and all that. And the rule with JPA, once you graduate, you're always a member, so you're always welcome back. And if I look at the kids that are there now, I think there's 7 new and 5 from previous years. They still continue to come, which is great. And I do want to call out the special hearts that go every week, and volunteer. The most valuable asset we have is the time and the experience we have to offer. And so Auxiliary Constable Ethan Noel and Aaron Phillips and Andrew Sagan. So one of the when I first started it, I reached out to an inner circle, and reached out to a few folks so Dr. Pat Donaghy was one of those folks on my inner circle. So that quote on the bottom is hers, and it so eloquently captures what the program's all about. And it's to provide the youth with the ideas and skills to imagine a future they may not have considered available to them. So that's JPA, and so I'll invite Auxiliary Kirby Gordon to come up and talk to his innovative program.
Chief of Worship, Commissioner. So I teach at Simons High School. I think this is my 26th year in the classroom. And Glenn talked about age, so I'm certainly getting up there for looking at retirement also. So the Police Foundation course started at Simons High School. I'm a department head of technology out there, and one evening there was an event going on at the school, and I stopped in uniform. I was off to go help out with patrol or something like that, and my boss from Fredericton was there. And he didn't realize I was an auxiliary member, and he said, wow, he says, we just had the police, Canadian Police Sector Council guys down in Fredericton, and they would love to have something in the high schools to direct students towards policing. And of course, we all know that we've got a small group of individuals for everybody. Everybody wants them in trades or university or sector councils or whatsoever. So he said that would be a really, really neat thing if we could make that happen. And I started that ball rolling. It's a locally developed course. Students can take, I believe, up to 2 locally developed courses towards their graduation requirements. It is a blast to teach that. I mean, who doesn't want to be a police officer? Right? There'd be a couple maybe want to be fired, but I mean, you know.
What about mayors? Nobody wants to be mayor?
I don't know about that.
We don't judge, right?
No.
We don't judge.
So I put that on that curriculum in 2012. I think I wrote the first one. I got failed that one and had to come back and I had to readjust some things. And 2013 we started our first class there. And I think there's 11 now, 112th next semester. There's a waiting list of students getting into the course. And it's just a blast to teach. It's a blast to have kids line up at your door when you open up the door and say, what are we doing today? So it's like, wow, this is neat. So origins, evaluation of police work, structure of police work, police governance, accountability, occupation, general patrol, police powers, use of force, ethics, and then we kind of go CSI. And that's science and policing. And I just started that Lockhart's exchange principle today. And we do fingerprints, we do blood spatter, we do anthropology, we do entomology with the insects, and ballistics, we do the ballistic side of things. And at the end of the course, we have a murder happens at Simon's High School. William G. Keating, no relation to our principal. He dies, and that's known as Billy Big Nose. And students come in and process the crime scene. And they come in and do all the forensic, they do blood splatter and ballistics and fingerprints, and it ends up being one of the students in the class that actually does the murder, and they don't know it, but they have to do the forensic of it. And it is just a joy to teach, and so supportive from the force here. When I do about police governance and searches and seizures, we do a little drug unit. You know, I can call up who's on patrol. If you got time, can you swing by and show us your roadside screener? Can you stop and we're doing the pair test down in the cafeteria. Can you stop and just, what was it like for you when you did it at the academy? And it's very supportive from the force, and I'm just so appreciative of these men and women that come and help me out here at the teaching at the school. So that's my little blurb on Simon's High School, and thank you so much.
Just a question.
Sure.
Have you tracked how many kids have gone through it, and have any of them ended up in policing?
Yes, I have one individual now that he's actually in uniform, working out in Alberta in Saskatchewan, and it's Big Head or Bison Head or something like that. And I've got another guy going to APA in January that went through the program. So
Excellent.
not everyone's successful, but we've done things like we did the public order unit, help them out with that. If I can show a picture that here that I've got students throwing sticks at the police officers, like. They're lining up for that. Teachers, yeah. If we could have our EDS or our team come in and show them their tools of the trade. If we could have even a police car show up at school, right? And let's open up the back door and get in. And just it's a cool course to teach.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anybody got any questions for Mr. Fillmore?
Just a
Comments?
You say you've got 21 members now. What's the ideal number that you're looking for? I know you've got the natural attrition that you mentioned. We want to bring 2 more in, but is that ideal?
That's I would think that's ideal. I mean, that's pretty much the number that we've operated in well with. I would say traditionally we've probably done 4 years and then the numbers slide down. But right now we probably run 6 years before we have to recruit again. So
Thank you.
Just a comment. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I think it says something about the cohesiveness of the organization. For this many people show up at 4:45 on a Tuesday night. So thanks for showing up in such great numbers. Great.
Thanks for your contribution. Appreciate it.
On
I
there?
have a question. Thank you. Yeah, so excellent presentation. Thank you. I have a question around the authority level. I just was trying to sort of process what authority does an auxiliary police officer have?
So they have all the authority that a police officer has when they're under the direction of a police officer.
Okay.
So nothing off duty, nothing, 6 blocks away, as long as they're under the authority of a police officer, then they carry the powers of a police officer. So just a couple of things here. If we hit some highlights here. So Mr. Keys would remember those 19 or 20 years ago when this program first started. It didn't go over real well within the organization. In fact, there was a lot of pushback about having auxiliary members as part of the organization, which quickly became acceptable in the organization. And at the time, when I was back within the rank and file and patrol, that members actually argued at times about, no, I'm taking that auxiliary. No, I'm taking the auxiliary. So we went from not wanting to being part of our organization. But Glenn hit on some things when we talked about those numbers. It's about a little over $3 million that otherwise we may have been paying out to do operations here within the police force. He's right, they don't replace officers under the contract, but they're there, and what they offer and what they show us with their support is invaluable. If you don't mind, because I don't get an opportunity to see all the auxiliary officers all the time. In fact, I just want to say a few things to the auxiliary, if you don't mind, kind of turn my back. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, auxiliary members, just listen to Glenn present his annual report for the 19th year. The report has detailed the work and hours put in by our auxiliary team members. As chief, on behalf of the commission, we thank you for giving back to your community. I hope and trust each of you truly believe that we recognize you each and every day for what you give back to this community. We live in a great city, one we can be so very proud of. But how does the city become great? It becomes great by the very fabric that makes it. That fabric is you. As I look around the room and I see each one of you, I see a story of so many individuals, so many stories, many different life experiences, and yet you all have at least one thing in common: your willingness to give your time to help others. And I've said this before to auxiliary members, and I've said this before to volunteers, and we truly, truly believe that within this organization. And it's so important that we keep that message, and you'll hear that message from me as long as I'm here as chief, because I think this is very, very important. As volunteers, you bring much to this police force and the community, be it leadership, advice, experience, a lending hand, or a shoulder to cry on for someone in need. So the board knows 24/7 these folks are out there, and wherever our members go, they go. As auxiliary members, you give the most precious resort of all, time, and you expect nothing in return. We are humbled by your generosity of spirit and your compassion for your fellow citizen. It is all that you do. It is all of you who do so generously give your time and caring attitude that makes the St. John Police Force and our community a better place. As chief and as a citizen, I thank you for doing that. And I appreciate that you were here tonight.
Again, we want to thank you for your volunteering, the amount of time you put in, your dedication. And I know what it's like to volunteer and spend hours and hours and hours, and people call me a professional volunteer, but anyway, again, I'd like to thank you, and we hope to continue on. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Hit the street.
Later on.
Ideally, December.
That sounds like the kind of course I wanted to take in high school. What was all this math and physics? Although it's an interesting question I think you asked, Ed, but probably unlocking all kinds of other
Oh, yeah.
science and all kinds of other.
Well, I can remember when I was in law school, I did a summer program with the RCT. And those guys were one guy in a car. They would die for an auxiliary memory book because otherwise they'd be answering multiple times. So when I came on as a summer student, I was given a car and a shotgun and said, don't take it out unless we're with you.
I had the same experience in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
And a very different environment than as I was just reflecting when they're talking about that, when I worked auxiliary with the Hamilton Police Force.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was a time where I think there were 600 or 700 officers on the force and 6 women. It was just at that time when they were just starting to allow women in the police force.
Did you say you were an auxiliary member?
Yeah, back in the mid-'80s, for 3 or 4 years, 3 years ago.
Mike, what were you doing in the mid-'80s?
We're taking auxiliary system on Friday and Saturday nights.
Yeah, well, the other thought was having should be handing out medals. I mean, see, Glenn had 7,000 hours.
Well, Chief, as you remember, he was basically, he would go as much as he could.
Yeah, nonstop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this whole junior police academy thing, that's Glenn's big, right from,
Until they finally
you know,
need you.
the inception of that to today. I mean, he's put so much into that, Boys and Girls Club. And,
Yeah, no question.
and he's a volunteer.
And he's the president of the Boys and Girls Club
Well, he's
too,
not
or
any
what?
longer now.
Okay.
He's changed jobs. He's
an
head
IT
of
guy.
IT for JDI now.
Yeah, he's an IT
So
guy.
he's got like this 90 or 100-hour week there, I think. And
Bruce, you had mentioned something about recognition for the folks who've got 200 plus hours.
Yeah.
Is that something you're going to take care of?
yeah, so we do it at that level, and then for the auxiliary team. So next year is the 170th anniversary of the St. John Police Force, and it's the 20th anniversary of the auxiliary. So we'll do some
Great.
things, some things next year, but we'll recognize the auxiliaries.
I don't think we've ever got an invitation, or since I've been on the commission, to any of their functions. Like we do the DARE, that's about the only one that we've ever got asked to attend.
Yeah, I can tell you in the past,
There's been
there was lots of good conversation stuff, so I'm not really sure.
two,
I wasn't here, but.
Mr. Chair, just 2 quick comments for me. First, or 3, I guess. A wonderful presentation. I really appreciate and enjoy these presentations, Chief, each time. Secondly, just it really tweaked my. I appreciate probably the force in the early days didn't like, but really tweaked my interest in what opportunities might exist for future models around, having constables do the most sort of serious work, and is there other opportunities with things like auxiliary and so on to do some of the other work just to lessen the burden? I think that's quite interesting. And then lastly, could there be some contemplation in the future of some stipend? Hit this threshold and it's $1,000 a year or something reasonable. That would be, I think, a token of appreciation for somebody that's giving. There seem to be 2 or 3 different levels there, but you've got some folks that are hitting some pretty serious volunteer hours. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on to item 7, which is consideration of issues separate from consent agenda. We don't have anything. Item 8, general correspondence, 8.1, internal monthly report. Everybody's looked at that. Need a motion to receive and file.
Everybody's find it here.
Just hold on for a second.
Okay.
8.1.
Oh, sorry.
It's page,
Just trying to find, we're at 5.4.
page 67. Yep, just went back. One more out.
Oh, yeah.
So nothing.
See, normally we used to go the opposite way with these, with the sessions, so I had already gone through it before, right?
Excuse me.
That's fine. No issues. I had no questions.
Any
I move
questions?
receive and file on that.
Okay.
Seconded.
8.2, overtime and court time expenses, October 2018. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question, Chief. When I look at the overtime, we're on a significant increase over last year. What's the thought process, or do you have any strategies that you're thinking of to kind of combat that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, just for information with regards to the overtime. There was a section put into the contract last year in negotiations, and unfortunately, there was no business practice put around to it. And in February of last year, many of the members put in and had their time approved for time off for many months down the road. So we've developed a business practice for January of 2019 to hopefully work around that. We also are in the process of hiring new members within the organization, and we should have those members up and ready to run here probably around the 15th of January. So that'll cut back on some of the overtime. So this year we've had 9 retirements, and we didn't replace anybody. So we do know that there's some of that salary that from those retirements have gone against the overtime. And then the other part is the court overtime. And in January of next year, we're working with the Crown Prosecutor's Office to try to schedule court when members are working. And we think we can make significant reductions with that. So we've put some other things in place within the organization, reporting structure, up until October of this year. From April to October this year, we ran vacant the Inspector of Patrol Services. So now that the Inspector Hayes is there, there's significant difference, and we have some accountability within the organization on overtime, whether it be for court or for patrol. So we believe there's an opportunity for savings next year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I follow up with a question, Chief? So when you have, so I guess that variance of 261, I mean, you're still going to work, I believe, toward an on-budget performance for the year. So where do you make that up? So you're holding back, I assume, in other areas?
Yeah, so some of that, though, when we're backfilling or we're showing overtime on the shifts, it's also, some of it's offset by revenue, because we bring in revenue for doing extra duty. So we do show that here's the overtime, but over here it shows that money has come in to replace that. The other part is we have money for salary employees who are not with us, so that we're using that against the overtime. And at times, that's more beneficial to do than to actually have a new body in the organization who can only be in one place at one time, compared to using X salary, and we can split it across the 4 platoon systems, or the 4 platoons.
And sorry, if I might chime in there real quick. For exactly that purpose, I had a conversation with Martin beginning of October asking for a new report, which essentially gives us a 12-month window on all of these expenses. You know, what did we budget? Replace it with what we actualized, and if there's any, I don't know, if we had budgeted a purchase in April, but now we're pushing it to October. Well, I want to know that in April I'm going to see a savings, which isn't really a savings on a full year basis, because we're now going to spend it in October. So exactly for this, like, Cape Peter and Rock Hall kind of scenario, I asked for the 12 months report that he's working on. From as far as I know, I'll follow up with him to see where we're at, but that we can see this better and that we have a better idea of where our year-end projection actually ends up. Because from time to time it looks very like deceiving that there is a big savings, but it's really just a shuffle.
Yeah, I would think that would also give us a better sense of, you could be, so an overtime budget, for example, you could have a major issue in January, go way over budget, and then do a great job in overtime the rest of the year, but you're gonna look over budget the entire year. So I think what
Right.
you
Or
get
if
at
you
is
save
real-
in wages but spend it in overtime, so you
Right.
would see that,
So
exactly.
we'll be able to see a bit of a trend story.
Exactly, and then the second piece that I had asked for, and it's already part of the police commissioner's budget in the pack, and I'll ask for this across the board, is a little more narrative on the story of variances. So there's one slide in here, which is slide 30, that shows you the variance year to date for October, and then it gives a little story beside it on what that is, so that we have a little more like business reasons for variances rather than just to see a number.
That's great.
Okay, motion to receive and file.
I'll move.
Second?
3, overtime hours, utilization report. Any questions? Motion to receive and file.
Move.
Second?
8.4, highlights of monthly activity report.
One question, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
Just one question. Just, have you looked at turning these like raw numbers into a stat so they're comparable, or you can benchmark against other cities and say, like, if you got so many, like 4,754 calls per 100,000 population or something like that, or per 10,000 population. Just trying to understand is the demand higher or lower in certain areas if you base it on population? That would help us understand if there's are we the same or different, and maybe identify areas where we can say, yeah, we got to target this area for improvement, or we're doing exceptionally well in this area.
So we haven't looked at comparing our organization against other organizations. What we have looked at, and we did a presentation to this commission several months back, is on a go-forward basis of what on the KPIs, and really making a true dashboard and have that comparison. It's hard, and I appreciate in business if you can look at hard stats, but we look at poverty, literacy, there's a lot of issues to deal with in St. John that, quite frankly, if we compare ourselves against even this KV, it's day and night.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing on average here 60,000 calls of service probably through the communication center, and probably another 10,000 a year in walk-ins. I saw a report the other day that said KV had 18 break-and-enters last year.
Different world.
Different. So then if we compare to Kodiak, what happens to us when we look at Moncton, it's really Moncton, Riverview, Dieppe. So it gets very hard. But there is, from criminal justice, Stats Canada, comparisons to look at the organization, and there's weighted averages, and I can certainly present that data to you and talk about crime severity index compared to other cities and across this country, and we do very, very well there on the crime severity index, a very, very safe city. So that may be something that, and this was, back up, this was something that, I'm trying to think, was June or August when we brought this. This is something brand new to the board. So this is sort of a work in progress to kind of say, how can we really get to what we want to do so that the board's fully informed about what we do, but more importantly, our community. Mm-hmm. But maybe from the Stats Canada side, if we look at, crime severity indexing and our clearance rates and so forth, that we could bring that in from a comparison point of view. I just don't know, first of all, if we have the resources on a continuous basis to look at us and compare us to other agencies. Yeah. I appreciate I certainly appreciate what you want to do. And
it was twofold. One, to look at if there are areas where we can improve, but
right. Secondly,
there are a number of challenges that St. John has on in a number of different areas. I was just thinking, discussions with the MLAs, if it stood out that St. John has some challenges in policing here. Does that bolster a case for more funding and when the time is right as well?
So it's somewhat of a, you know, you look at those stats, because, you know, in the past, we never saw those, and interesting here, you just started that in June. Obviously, you had the number of calls, it just wasn't something that made much sense if they're in isolation. Sure, we have 60,000 calls for service. What does that mean compared to Halifax, which has 5 times the population of St. John, and those types of things. You know, the stats I used to see a few years ago on crime rates was, you know, better in the sense that it showed crime rate was going down for violent crimes in St. John, for assaults and things like that. Maybe in conjunction with the numbers there, if you are making a case to politicians or whoever, having a couple sitting at the table is one thing, but at the end of the day, the buck flows down from way above. And maybe it's just another tool to put in the briefcase when you look at, you know, the stats for crimes and things of that nature, along with the calls for service.
And I totally agree with that. You know, as you say that, when we talk about running this organization, we talk about crime because we think about that's sort of what the dollars and cents is, what we have to do. It wasn't until this week, or I guess yesterday, and I looked at something. We spend $15,500 a month just to have airtime on our radio system. Never really broke it down that way before. Send that message out. Those are, you know, these are the costs to doing business, and there's many of those costs to doing business, but I don't think anybody that would sit around council or this commission would ever say, you're spending $15,500 just to buy airtime from a lion. And as chief, I didn't really think of it that way. So we can break down, you know, a lot of things, and I think it sends a strong message. But I think the most important part is that's operating, but this is to do the job and make our community safe and to identify those issues. So it's great.
Just to bolt on, I mean, I think first off, sort of kudos to the chief and his team, because we didn't have this report before. But I think it does create, in my view, an opportunity to drill down in and get into and just peel the data back. So you know, if we're continuing to struggle, chief, with 48,000 calls so far to the end of October, which means probably 60,000 calls at the end of the year. Well, what are those 60,000 calls? And then to your point that you've been rightly so vocal about, what's core policing and what's we're taking on behalf of the province. So that gives us an opportunity, I think, to then have those conversations. And then secondly, around the benchmarking piece, I'm a big believer in benchmarking, you know, and certainly an opportunity. Well, you would have the opportunity, chief, through your colleagues, but the Tri-Cities work very closely. So that's something that you know, we certainly could try a pilot for 6 months and say, hey, what if we benchmarked, you know, in this area? Would that be we are benchmarking in many areas already between Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, and I do believe it is different, absolutely. But I think to your point, Doug, it would shine a light to the province to say this is why the chief's mental health initiatives need to be funded. This is why our harm reduction initiatives need to be funded. I met with the medical association last week talking about opioid prescriptions and you know, those kind of issues. So, thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions on 8.4? Comments? Motion to receive and file.
So moved.
And need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Open. Yeah.
Okay, meeting adjourned.